All right. So I've been trying to figure out what my take is, what my position is on sexuality in regards to Christ and my soul and the theory and all my beliefs. And I've been trying to figure this out for a long time. And today I think I made at least some progress because I realized that according to my theory, every relationship has two and only two reference in it. So that if we're going to talk about, let's say, even a family unit, mom, dad, brother, sister, or son and daughter, whatever. And even in those labels, we see the same two reference. So, mother, right? That's a two referent relationship. The mom herself is one of the reference, obviously. But the other referent is the kid, the child of the mother. That's what makes the mother a mother, not the father, the child. So when a mother gives birth to her child, that's when she becomes a mother, not when she falls in love with the father, not when she has sex with the father, only when she conceives, when the zygote forms. And by then, the relation between the mother and the father is already completed. The relation with the child begins at conception after the relation with the father is complete. So when we consider each of those relations in the family unit, it looks on its surface like there's a whole bunch of them all compiled together because the father is, related to the son and daughter and the mother. And it looks like those are like for reference. That's not the case. The father is the father of the son. That's one relation that the son and the father share with each other. And then the father's also the father of the daughter. But the relationship that he has with his daughter is not the same as the relationship that he has with his son. So you can't interchange those relationships. And that's why you always end up with a favorite kid. It is inevitable. You will always have this. There's no such thing as a family unit where every single person in there is exactly equal to every other person in there. You can't treat Susie as if she was Sally, as if she was Bob, as if he was Mary. They're all different. And because every single different person has a different relationship with somebody else, then you can't have a relationship that has more than two reference at the same time. There is no relationship that can form that has more than two reference at a time. This is the basis of Einstein's theory of relativity. When we apply that same logic of a two reference system in relativity to bodies in motion versus standing still. The theory of relativity says there's no distinction. There's no way that you can draw a distinction between falling in a free fall on Earth in a gravity well versus accelerating in a spaceship, constantly accelerating. If you were inside of a spaceship with no windows and no external stimulus and no sensory data, and you had to try to figure out, are you actually in that spaceship or are you in an elevator on Earth? You wouldn't be able to tell the difference. There's no way that you can tell the difference. They're identical and interchangeable, and that's the basis of relativity. So there you go again, there is no third referent. There's just the two. There's the falling body, and then there's the body of mass that it's falling toward. There's the accelerating body, and then there's the rate of acceleration or the rate of velocity at each of those frames of reference. And that's what builds acceleration. In other words, how fast the spaceship was moving a second ago versus how fast it's moving now. And those are the two reference. And there's no third. There's no room for it. If there were, then you would be able to tell the difference. But you can't. Physically, that's impossible. So we know that. That's been physically proven. If it weren't for relativity, then everything Einstein said would be wrong, and we'd just throw him out, and there wouldn't be any theory of relativity. What that has to do with relationships between human beings doesn't look like it has anything in common, but it does. And what it's saying is that not only can you not tell physically, you can't, because of the lack of that third referent, you also can't interchange relations with humans for the same reason, because there's no third referent. You can't compile three people into one relationship. Each of those two people has a different relationship with each other. If I'm dating two chicks at the same time, my relationship with Sally is not going to be interchangeable with my relationship with Susan. Sally and Susan are two completely different people, and no matter how similar they might be, no matter how deeply I might love both of them, let's say, I'll always love one of them more than the other. And at the end of the day, I'm going to either pick Sally or Susan, but I can't pick both because it just won't last. And even if somehow I did, they'd get jealous of each other and they'd make me pick one at some point. It'll eat at them. I've actually done this in my real life, and I've experienced exactly what this feels like. And it's weird because it's like you're trying to balance two different things and they're not the same at all. So it doesn't, you can't make it work forever. It never lasts forever. A throuple, okay, is not possible to sustain for a long period of time without objectifying somebody. And the reason that I say that is because unless you're willing to say that we're just going to do this irregardless of whether it works or not, or we're just going to do this and I'm in charge and the rest of you two, you just don't fight. And I'm just going to tell you, you don't fight with each other. And both of you are in kind of like a polygamous relationship so that, you know, there's no animosity or whatever. But even then, I'm still going to be closer to Susan or Sally. It's going to happen. It cannot be the case that I'm exactly, precisely, equally close to both of them in exactly the same way at exactly the same time forever. It's not going to last. At some point, I'm going to get closer to one of them and further away from the other one, and they'll feel it. And there is no way to have a legitimate, sustainable, polygamous or polyandrous or polyamorous relationship with multiple human beings like that. And I thought that was really interesting, that if you apply that same logic that is proven in physics to human relationships, it still fits. And from my personal experience, that is the case. The relationship that I had with one of the chicks was completely different than the relationship that I had with the other one. And that makes sense. It should make sense because they're not the same person. So, of course, I'm not going to relate to them the same way. I mean, even if I was dating twins, it would be different because they have different personalities. And I've met twins over and over. There's always one of them that's dominant and the other one is more reserved. One of them is really outgoing and the other one is more introverted. It's always like that. One of them's a goth and the other one's a prep. It just doesn't ever happen that you get two people that are exactly the same in every single way. It doesn't happen. No matter how similar they are, there's something that isn't going to fit. It's something off about, or something different from one to the other. It's not the same. So they're going to dress different. They're going to talk differently. They're going to have different interests. They're going to have different memories. If you ask them about the same event, they're going to have two different takes on that event. Because when you go through life, you don't go through it as a body. You go through it as a soul and a mind. And that's going to process things completely differently. And you stack that up and stack that up. And over the years, they end up completely different people. They might be really similar at birth, but the longer that you let them go, the further apart they're going to get. And it doesn't mean further apart like they don't like each other anymore or something. It just means they're more distinct. So one of them is going to be the older one that gets assigned with the chores or something like that. The other one is going to be the softer one, the one that's more reserved, that gets a little bit more babied. So it just ends up like that. It just is that way. So I don't think at this point, I don't think there's any more room that I can offer because of the strictness of the logic of my theory. I don't think there's any room to offer credibility to polyamorous relationships where someone's in love with two people at the same time and sustains them both. I don't think that that's possible, at least not forever anyway. It will end at some point. So, and it'll end with one of them winning and the other one losing. Always. It always happens. One of the relationships will continue and one of them will end. And it's kind of like I always say is like there's always a first and a last. There's always a bigger and a smaller. There's always a larger and a smaller. There's always a little bit of difference between one thing and another. No two things are exactly alike. No two people are exactly alike. No two relationships are exactly alike. So because of the fact that they're not exactly alike, that means that one of them will be better than the other one in at least some metric, some measure. And that means that you can't really sustain it over a long period of time. It's just like those twins. When you first start out, yeah, you could have a throuple. You could have two chicks at the same time in the beginning. But the longer that you take that relationship and the deeper that you get connected to these chicks, at some point you're going to find that you like one of them more than the other one. And it's going to start growing bigger and bigger, unless you want to just fuck both of them and that's it. If you don't have any real relationship and it's so casual that you literally could just take it or leave it with both of them, at which point you don't love either one. But if you love even one of those two chicks, then you're going to end up closer to her than the other one. It always happens. There's no way that you could just keep going like that for forever unless you don't love either one, or unless you're just treating her as an object. It's the only way that you can make that actually sustained over a long period of time is to just treat her like an object. You're just going to stay here no matter what you do, no matter what you feel, no matter what you say. You're just going to be in this position. Well, that's not a real relationship. A real relationship is fluid, dynamic, and changes. And you have to make new rules depending on what has happened in the past. And you have to make it personal to her. What has she done that makes you focus down on this thing, for example? Some chicks, you have to really watch them hard because they are flirtatious. And so you have to make sure that they're not going to get, into a flirtatious relationship with some other dude. So you got to really watch them, but they're really honest and they'll always tell you, but they're also flirtatious. So you have to watch them. Another chick might be the exact opposite. She'll be really loyal, but she'll be completely dishonest, where it'll be like, okay, I don't have to worry about you spending the weekend camping with your friends over there because they're good people. They're going to make sure you're not going to fuck around. But then when you come back home and I ask you about what you did, you're going to lie to me and be like, oh, well, yeah, all we did was just, hang out. But in secret, you were out fucking snorting coke, and you just didn't want to tell me. And you didn't cheat on me, but you went out and you did some fucking drugs, or you went out and hung out with that dude that I don't like. Not that I would think that you'd sleep with it, but I just don't like that guy. But you went out and did it anyway, and then you lied to me, something like that. So there's different hang-ups that you'll find. There's different things that you got to watch for. There's different personalities that people have. So the methods that you will use with one person are not going to work on another. And children are a great example of that too. The discipline that you apply to your son is not going to be the same as the discipline that you apply to your daughter, and vice versa. You're not going to treat your daughter as if she was your son, and you're not going to treat your son as if he was your daughter. You're going to treat them differently, and that's okay. They have equal expectations in the long run as far as like basic rules, but the specifics of that as to how they actually interact with you, the specific way that they interact with you is always going to be different. They're not going to be exactly the same. You wouldn't say exactly the same words to your son that you would say to your daughter, and vice versa. You're going to say different words. They might mean about the same thing, but the way you say it is going to change. They might, in general, follow the same rules, but they're going to specifically apply to specific different things. So the relationships that we form are between one person and one other person, and that's one relationship. And then you've got another person, and that's another relationship. So you've got the relationship between the father and the son, that's one relationship, and then you've got another relationship between the father and the daughter, that's a second relationship. And those two relationships are not the same. That you can't combine them into a single unit. They're not interchangeable. They're not equal parts of one system. They're completely different relationships. So because of that, where you can't have the same relationship with two people at the same time, then you can't love two people exactly the same way at exactly the same time. And therefore, you can't date two same people at the same time in a serious way, in a marriage. So yeah, you, like I said, you could pull off having a threesome for a while. You can pull off having a throuple for a while. You could pull off a polyandrous relationship, polygamous relationship for a while. But if you get married, then at that point I say that's not legit. You can't really say that you're married to 6 different chicks. You're really married to one chick who lets you have 5 girlfriends on the side. And those are all side chicks. They're not your main chick. Your main chick is going to be the one that you're closest to. The rest of them are just sort of like on the side. They're side dishes. But there's always a main course. Unless they're all side dishes, at which point it's just objectifying. It's just, I have 6 bodies. I have 6 vaginas. Instead of having 6 wives. I have 6 vaginas. And I like to stick it in them equally. So I guess I'm, legit. It just doesn't work. I'm sorry, it just does not work. It's the only way that system works is if you, like I said, objectify the people that are in it to the point where they don't make decisions anymore. They make a contract, and you literally buy them, and you say, I own you. You can't leave. You can't change anything. You can't make any of these decisions. I don't care what you feel like. And this is just the way that it's going to happen. And that's the way that every single polygamist or polyandrous relationship will work, because that's the only way it can work, because otherwise everybody's going to be fighting each other, vying for power. It's the only way to keep them all from killing each other off or, throwing each other out or leaving, is to say, well, you just don't get to make that decision, because you're going to feel like it. You're going to feel like making that decision at some point if you have any real relationship with this other person, unless it's completely superficial, at which point you would want to leave because you could get closer to someone else where it isn't superficial. And that's just the way that is. So the only way that you can have a polyamorous relationship that lasts longer than, I'd say, about 3 months is if you are forcing it. If you are having a loveless relationship, or you're having an expected relationship where it doesn't change ever. No matter what happens, it's always the same. And some people can pull that off because it'll be a polygamous relationship. The dude will tell his wives, no matter what you say, no matter what you feel, no matter what you do, this is the way that it is. And he has to do that, because if he doesn't do that, then they're going to fight each other. If he just sits there and just hangs out and just does his thing like normal, then they're going to go at each other's throats, because they're going to start picking up, oh, well, he spent, Easter with you, but he didn't do it with me. He bought you this turkey dinner, but he didn't do it for me. He cooked this for you, but he didn't ever cook for me. And they'll start comparing, because that's what relativity is. It's the comparison. It's the ratio. How much time are you spending with Sally versus Susan? What did you do with Sally that you don't do with Susan? And then you have to either force yourself to do that and treat them as if they were equal when you know and feel in your heart that they are not, because they're two different people. They can't be identical. So you can't treat them the same because they're not the same person. So you can't treat them the same because they're not the same person. So then you're going to treat one better and one worse. And it's the same thing that Jesus says about serving two masters. He says you can't serve two masters. Eventually, they're going to conflict with each other, and you're going to have to pick one because you can't serve both because they're not the same master. So they're going to have two different rules. They're going to have two different expectations. They're going to have two different value systems. And those value systems are not going to be identical. So when you go and you do something, that's going to piss one of them off. And then you're going to have to appease them. But you can't, because if you do that appeasement, it's going to piss the other one off. So you can't do it. There's no way to satisfy both those masters at the same time. There's no way to satisfy both these chicks at the same time. I mean, you can do it where it's like, oh, well, we all, have sex with each other at the same time. We just always have a threesome every single time. That's not going to work. At some point, one of them is going to want some alone time with the other one because it just doesn't feel quite as intimate. If you're doing it in a threesome, it's not the same as if you're just with that other person. When you're just with that one other person, it's way deeper and way more serious. If you're doing it in a threesome, there's always a little bit of levity with it. There's always a little bit of, I wouldn't say superficiality, but lightness. It doesn't get as deep. And you can argue and you can say, oh, I've had deep relationship. You can say whatever you want, but I'm going to guarantee you cannot show me a single relationship that has 3 or more partners in it where one of those partners has usurped all of the other ones. You can't show me a single one. You can't show me a single polyamorous relationship where one person, usually a dude, takes control over all the other ones, because that's the only way that will ever work. And then he's the master and they all serve him. Well, how's that a problem? Well, it's a problem because they're not the same servants, if you will. They're not the same people. So he's going to have a favorite servant. Whether he says it or not, whether anyone acknowledges it or not, he does. He's got a favorite. Always. If you have 6 kids, you're going to have a favorite kid. Doesn't matter what you say, oh, I love you all equally. No, you don't. You have a favorite kid, and everyone knows it. Everyone feels it. Everyone knows who it is. And if you live in a large family, you know who it is. You always know who it is. Everyone always knows who it is. They don't want to admit it. They don't want to acknowledge it. They don't want to say it. But there it is. Anyway, for all to see. There always is a favorite. So, you get, even if it's just a traditional 4-unit family, mom, dad, son, daughter. When you look at the mom, she's going to pick a favorite, or not pick, but she's going to have, whether she likes it or not, she's going to have a closer relationship with the son, or she's going to have a closer relationship with the daughter. If you're just looking at the mom and relation with the kids, she's going to have a favorite kid. She's not going to say it. She's not going to admit it. If you ask her, she'll say no. She loves them exactly the same, even though that's impossible. And she knows it too. She'll feel that. When she answers you, she'll be a little sheepish about it. She'll be a little bit abashed. Oh, no. She'll be all defensive. No, I love them equally, exactly the same in every way, every time, everywhere, forever. No, lady, you don't. You love one of them more than you love the other, and that's okay. It just is that way. It's part of life. It just is that way. Why is it that way? Because your son is not your daughter. Your older daughter is not your younger daughter. They're not the same person, so you can't love them the same. I don't know where this expectation comes from, but people always think that that's how it's supposed to be. It can't be that way. You can't love 2 people the same way at the same time. It can't happen. You can't serve 2 masters, and you can't have 2 girlfriends, and you can't have 2 favorites. It just doesn't work. And everybody's going to go, yeah, whatever. But at the same time, it is what it is. Okay? It just is. It is what it is. You don't like it. You don't want to admit it. You don't want to agree with me, but it's still that way, even irregardless. Does not matter because of the limits of relativity. You can only have 2 reference. In any relationship, there's only 2. Not 3, not 6, not 12, 2. The end. It cannot have more than that. If there were, we wouldn't live in a physical world that abides by that rule. Physical objects abide by this rule, and you're going to tell me that you don't. It applies, okay? Well, I'm not an object. I'm not an object. You are in a relationship, okay? The same way that a spaceship is in a relationship with the mass that it is orbiting around. It doesn't. I don't care. I don't care if we're talking about spaceships and planets. I don't care if we're talking about moms and dads. I don't care if we're talking about brothers and sisters. I don't care if we're talking about husbands and wives. It is all the same shit when you talk about relativity. Relativity has two reference only every single time because there's no two relationships that are exactly alike. And don't you dare say otherwise. It is true. Every single relationship that you have with another human being is at least slightly different than every other relationship that you've had with every other human being. And if it's different, then that means there's one that is better and there's one that is worse according to whatever metric you want. For example, let's say you've got mom again, right? And you've got son and the daughter. She's going to be closer to the son or the daughter just in general. And then she says, no. Okay, well, then we'll make it even more specific. When you go get your nails done, are you going to bring your son with you? No, I mean, we don't do that. There you go. Told you. Okay. You go out camping. Is your daughter going to have as much fun as your son? Well, no, she doesn't really like being outdoors. There you go again. And it's like that every goddamn time. And don't you tell me that that's not the case. It is. Now you can say, well, as a good mom, I try to balance that out. So we go on the nail salon on Tuesday and we go camping on Saturday and it's equal. It's like, okay, I guess it's asymmetrically equal. But it isn't exactly equal because camping isn't exactly equal to nail salon. Because mom, don't lie to me, you like going to the nail salon. Yeah. Do you like going camping? Not as much as I like the nail salon. Boom, done, next. And that's just how it is. It's just that way. You're going to have a favorite. You're going to have a close. And yeah, you do try to balance those out, those little imbalances. Well, Susie's sad because she likes to play with the horses, but you know, Jimmy is sad because he likes to play with the dog. And it's like, you know, well, okay, well, then we'll just get Sally a horse or Susie a horse and we'll get Jimmy his dog. But we don't give Jimmy's dog to Susie and we don't give Susie's horse to Jimmy. We treat them differently, but we try to balance it so that in these little local things, a horse is not a dog, right? So those are different. They're unequal. But when you look at, okay, well, they both have a pet. Okay, you know, so then it's balanced. But it isn't equal because a horse is not a dog. So it is not equal. And Susie and Jimmy are going to bring that up to you at some point. One of them will say, yeah, but the horse eats more than the dog. So, you know, the dad gets pissed off. Well, we can't afford the horse. No, Daddy, no. Why would you do that to me? Well, the horse eats too fucking much. It takes too much room. I have to have a big, giant-ass farm to house this one horse versus the dog. I can keep the dog inside. He's fine. He doesn't need a giant-ass farm to run around in. The horse does. So, you know, we have to move. Sorry, Susie, but your horse is going bye-bye. And Jimmy's all happy. Yay, I get to keep my dog. Okay? So there's not going to be a time where you can ever say that the relationship that you have with two different people, with Susie and Jimmy, are exactly the same every single time. If it were, they'd be the same person. And it just is not that way. There's always that imbalance. There's always that slight difference. There's always that, occasional mishap. There's always stuff like that. And like I said, as a good parent, yes, I agree. You do try to balance that out over the long term. But even then, you will end up closer to one of your kids than you will the others. And you will feel guilt and you will feel shame and you will feel embarrassment and you will get defensive and you will say, no, and you'll think you're a bad parent. And it just is that way. It just is. You just have to. That's just the way it is. And even if you had an only child where they don't have any brothers or sisters, that kid is going to be closer to one of the parents than the other one. And again, oh no, oh my God, it's so terrible to admit and agree with it, but it's true. It just is. You're going to be closer to one of your parents than the other. I was closer to, when I was growing up, I had to be closer to my mom because I lived with her more. That's just who I lived with. That's who had custody over me. But as I got older, I got closer to my dad. When I was free and I was an adult, I got closer to my dad because my mom and me just don't get along. So I ended up getting closer to my dad because, again, they're not the same person. So I'm going to get closer to one of them than the other one. My dad's girlfriends, he had several of them. Did I have a favorite mom? Yes, his current mom. I like her more than I liked the past girlfriends that he had in the past. And, it's the same thing with my mom. She had various stepdads, and I've got a favorite stepdad, or at least they're not the same to me. And that's how it's always been, and that's how it's always going to be. So that means that you can't have a polygamous or a polyandrous marriage. You can pull it off in the short term, but you cannot pull it off in the long term without taking people's choices away from them, without saying you're not allowed to make this choice. Or if you do make a choice, then you're going to have to consult with everybody else before you make it, which means that you're owned. Okay, you're not free to make your own decision, the same way that a normal wife or a normal husband would make a decision on the fly, or at least make a decision independently of anyone else. They just decide themselves that this is what they're going to do. You can't do that anymore because now you're in this polygamous or your polyandrous relationship, and it's so complicated and so complex that the only way you can make sense of it is to give that up and say, no, you know what? I'm not going to make those decisions. I'm going to have somebody else make those decisions, either as a group or one person, usually the dude that just makes it for me, because I can't stay in this relationship and make my own decisions independently at the same time. I can either have my own independence or I can have this relationship, but I can't have both. You can't have your independence if you're in a polyamorous relationship. It just won't work because of the limits of relativity. So that's why there's the dude who gets to have real relationships and the main chick that gets to have the relationship, and then a bunch of side dishes on the side that he just likes to bang, and she lets him do it. And that's the real way it is. And again, I know no one's going to want to agree with that. No one's going to want to admit that. That is so harsh, and it's so fucking tough to look right at that, because that's people's lives, and they spent years and they devoted their time and they, sacrificed all this stuff. And it's like, well, you didn't have to do that. I'm sorry, but you didn't have to do that. And you chose to do it, I guess, but you have to admit, after you got into this relationship, you felt like leaving, and you didn't, because you gave that choice up to somebody else, and they chose for you to stay, despite the fact that you wanted to leave, despite the fact that you felt like leaving. Unless, of course, you just don't give a shit, at which point you're not really married anyway. So like I said, you could be quote unquote married, but you won't be independent. Or you could be independent, but you won't be married. But you can't have both if you're in a polyamorous relationship. If you're in a normal, traditional, either wife and wife, husband and husband, or husband and wife relationship, a normal relationship, then you can have your independence and the relationship at the same time. But if you have two husbands and one wife, or if you have one husband and two wives, or something like that, where it is beyond the two-person limit, at that point, somebody has to give up their independence. Because if they retain their independence, they're going to get jealous, and they're going to make the other person choose, and then it's going to end one of the relationships. It always has happened, it always will happen, and it is happening right now. Thank you, and good night.